Hey everyone, this is Jake with Classic Daily, and today I'm going to show you some more information with our standalone ECUs and really anything that runs FOME firmware. Yeah, so let's get right to it. So that last video we explained kind of the basis of the hardware and the way the inputs and outputs work. So today and continuing on through these next videos, I'll show you each tab here up at the top. As you can see, I'm not connected to an ECU right now because it really doesn't matter. We're just going to go through and explain what's going on. Later in the series, I will show you a video of a car on the dyno and multiple different scenarios and whatnot to show you how it works. Okay, so base engine, we talked about this in that last video. Number of cylinders, displacement, which does matter. Your firing order, which does matter. Vehicle weight, it matters a little bit, not too much. And then your fuel strategy here is very important. This information isn't really necessarily needed, nor this right now. Fuel strategy, speed density would be using a MAP sensor for the load. MAF air charge would be using a MAF, and alpha N would be using a TPS sensor. We're going to leave this in speed density for the series of these videos, and we will talk about these other ones later in another video. So next up is limits and protections. And you can see we have a few things in there. So we're going to talk about rev limiter first because that's at the top. Okay. So these two first things, fuel cut or cut fuel or cut spark on RPM limit, these two settings will also correlate and go into the other cut methods that are going on here. Okay. So however you have this set, if you want it set, shut your injectors off and your coils, yes. Or if you have just one, that is up to you. But you should need to have something in there. Both of them would be the safest. Fuel for sure. So this next thing where it says use CLT-based RPM limit curve, that's going to come over to here. So right now I have it set no. If I hit yes, this will light up. And this one goes off because now what it's using is using coolant temperature to change how much what your limiter is. So if your coolant temperature is lower, your limiter will be lower. So in this case, we have at 115 Celsius, we can bring that back and we can bring this up. So if you are at 100 Celsius, it's going to be 6,000 RPMs. So this could be varying on if you don't want the rev limiter to go as high if your coolant temp engine is cold. We're going to turn this off. Then that turns on the RPM hard limit. So in this case, it's set at 6,800 RPMs. This would be set to whatever your engine wants or whatever you want that to be. Okay. The hard limit hysteresis, I believe I said that correctly. That's going to be how low or how many RPMs it drops off of this limit or this curve before fuel and or spark are reinstated. So in this case, it'd have to drop 100 RPMs to get the engine back running again. This can be changed lower. This can be put higher. This can be put whatever you want. If it's a super high number, then the engine's got to drop way down before things start going again. So you want this usually pretty low. 50 is a good number, and that will change the sound of your limiter too. Okay, so we're going to move this over here just for the sake of keeping this to explain some things. Okay, we go to boost cut. Simple one. Boost cut is going to be the KPA, the absolute KPA. So that would be above 100 KPA is boost, below 100 KPA is vacuum. This would be the cut. So if your engine hits 200 KPA, that'd be 100 KPA of boost, 14 PSI. Then it's gonna apply the cut, and that's gonna be however you have the setup here. Will it be RPM, or it'll be fuel or spark or both? Okay, close out of that. Go to injector duty cycle cut. I'll make this bigger. So this is going to be when the injectors hit their level, their duty cycle. So you're out of injector, and it will then apply this cut. We're going to skip instantaneous for a second and jump down to sustained. So sustained injector duty cycle limit, we have it set at 85%. So it's not going to let you go over 85%. We have it set now. You can put this up to 95. You can put it up to 99. You can make this however you want. I would say, safe is 90. 95 is fine too. But again, this is based on what you're doing with your engine and what your setup is. This is going to be sustained injector duty cycle delay. So that means that it's going to, if it's held at 90% for, or over 90% for 1 second, it's going to apply your cuts in your, over here in the injector set, in the rev limiter, cut fuel, cut spark, or however you have it set up. Okay. So now instantaneous injector duty cycle limit. So let's say that if it hits, let's say we set this at 95 for the sake, it's got to, if it hits 95, it can, if it goes above 90, but it's less than a second. So it's just for a short period. It's going to let it get up into that area. But because this is our limit, if it hits 95, it shuts down instantly. So it hits that even for a moment, it's going to turn it off. So we put this to 110, which is, yes, above 100% of the injector. But if you have a boosted engine and you're raising fuel pressure with boost, you can go over that 100% here and there. So this would mean if we get above 90 for less than a second, if it spikes up to even up to 110, if it hits 110 for a moment, instantaneous, it's going to apply the cut. Oil pressure protection. So this only will work if you have an oil pressure sensor set up in sensors and oil pressure. Okay, you must have a sensor set up in here, and you must have the curve set up in here. There's not one set up now, but you would need to choose an analog input, and it has to be set up for this to work. If it doesn't work, if it's not set up, don't try to make it work because it will be upset. So what this is saying is that your minimum oil pressure after start, this is going to be kPa, would be, if it's going to take 5 seconds to reach this pressure, and if it doesn't reach it, it applies the cut. Okay, shuts the engine down, shuts it off. 100 kPa would be 14 psi of oil pressure or so. So that's not bad for something that we, it's going to get up there and then it's going to hopefully climb. Okay, so then here, enable low oil pressure protection. Right now we have it set at false, meaning it's off. If you hit it to true, it's going to be on. And then oil pressure protection timeout means that it needs to be, if you look at the little tooltip here, delay before cutting fuel due to low oil pressure. So it's going to wait 5 seconds for your pressure to be below your threshold here before it cuts fuel, shuts the engine off. So this graph can be, silence my phone. Sorry about that. It will have this curve based on RPM and then minimum pressure. This is in kPa. So use a conversion if you need to figure out PSI, but it's going to say that at higher pressure, or higher RPM, we want to make sure we have higher pressure, and that if it starts to dip for a oil starvation issue, it will shut the engine off to protect it. Okay. That's not where we want to go. We'll go to lambda protection. So lambda protection, everything in the ECU is working in lambda, not in AFR. It does convert to AFR for a display right here by my head, but it does work in lambda. So what this is doing is it's saying if we get away from our target lambda, that it will, again, protect the engine and shut the engine down. It works very similar to the oil pressure, where there is a little bit more settings where you can have it so it's only going on at higher loads, above 60% load, or however you want this to be. If you only want it to be, let's say, when you're in boost, you can put that up higher, because your load can change based on the fuel strategy. And then it would have there's a delay. So if it hits this deviation for more than a second, it cuts fuel, and then this would be what happens if it cuts. It's got to drop to these situations to reinstate the engine running. Okay, so if it cuts it, it's going to drop down and then kick back in. So you're not just sitting there not running at all. So with all this information I'm showing you, this is information. You still do need to tune the engine, and you need to understand and give the engine what it wants. So this is the theory. Later on, there'll be some videos where you actually are getting a little bit more in real time what's going on. Okay. This trigger, we talked about that a little in the last video. This is all your your cam and crank sensors coming into the engine. Battery and alternator, if your engine is controlled, has a alternator that's controlled by the ECU, this can do it in here. We're going to talk about this too much in this video. Outputs, we talked about that in the last one. So these are all the outputs, the main stuff that's going on for your fuel pump, tach, etc. Fans, all that here. And then air conditioning. So your air conditioning, this would be if the ECU is controlling a relay that controls AC. And even if it's not controlling the AC, you could have an input coming into here so it does some different things. So this would be your input switch. This could be normally probably a digital input. Your AC relay would be most likely a low side, but again, it depends on the board and the hardware that you're using. It's going to turn that relay on. This AC switch is if it's backwards, if it's a ground or a 12 volt, whatever it might be coming in, so you can affect that. So this, if you are controlling it, it's gonna, if you are controlling a relay with the ECU, this delay is going to be, so the compressor waits half a second or whatever you want it to be. This would be max RPM, so above 5,000 RPM, it turns the air conditioning off. If the coolant temp comes up above some, it turns it off. If you floor it, it turns it off. And then these two here, we're gonna add air to your idle valve. So this would be a percentage that it's adding, and this would be how much RPM it's adding to your closed loop if you have that set up. Okay? You can't answer. What am I saying? Okay. So that's a general thing of what's going on in all the base engines. Next video, we'll go over a bunch of fuel. We probably won't go over everything in fuel, but we'll go over a big chunk of it in fuel, the bigger things that the majority of people need. So appreciate it, and we will catch you on the next one.